How's it going, everyone? Welcome to Chemistry Basics presented by Doc Dean's Pools. I am James, and today we are talking to you all about alkalinity. So, alkalinity is very closely related to a pool's pH. What exactly is alkalinity though? Really, all it is a solution's ability to neutralize acid. Therefore, if you have higher alkalinity, it's going to be able to neutralize stronger acids far more effectively. The most common thing that we use to increase alkalinity in swimming pools is sodium bicarbonate. You would have heard me talk about that a little bit if you'd have watched the pH episode or read our pH article over on docdeanspools.com. What sodium bicarbonate does, it's a fantastic neutralizing agent for a whole lot of acids. In fact, I remember back in my college days when I was in the chem labs and whatnot, if we were ever working with hydrochloric acid or any of that kind of stuff, especially when we were learning about our lab safety procedures, we had to make sure that obviously we knew correct eyewear, correct clothing, correct type of shoes that you're allowed to wear. We weren't even allowed to go into the lab if we had flip-flops on. A little bit difficult if you're in college in Florida. Pretty much all of us had to carry a second pair of shoes with us on lab day. But when we were learning about pH and we were working with acids, especially hydrochloric acid, we always had to make sure that we had a whole lot of neutralizing agents around us, and one of the more common that we had in the classroom pretty much at all times was sodium bicarbonate. So we said that alkalinity neutralizes acid, but what does that mean for your pool? Having an appropriate level of alkalinity in your pool water will serve as a buffer for your pH. It acts kind of like a real soft cushion that if your pH starts pushing up into it, it'll be like, hey, slow down. You don't want to go any higher than this. It stops a phenomenon called the pH bounce. When we have low alkalinity in swimming pools, the pH, which doesn't have that buffer in it now, is able to swing wildly from high to low, and it's where a lot of people get caught using lots and lots of muriatic acid and using lots and lots of soda ash to try and manage that rising and falling of the pH level week to week. Alkalinity levels are going to be especially important for you if you have a salt pool. It's going to mess with that balance of the hydrogen and hydroxide ions, which is therefore going to raise that pH level. If you don't know anything about pH, I highly recommend you watch our Chemistry Basics episode all about pH. You can find that here or in the link in the description. So alkalinity acts as a buffer for your pH, and that's all well and good. What type of range though should we be looking for our alkalinity? pH was obviously on a kind of sliding scale that you're trying to stay fairly close to the middle of. Alkalinity fortunately is not on a sliding scale like that. It's measured in parts per million, just like chlorine, calcium, hardness, phosphate, pretty much everything other than pH that we need to keep a hold of. Your ideal range for your alkalinity reading is going to be between 100 and 140 parts per million. Different chlorines are said to favor different ends of that spectrum, with some such as calcium hypochlorite and sodium hypochlorite preferring slightly lower on the scale, and things like chlorine gas, dichlor, trichlor preferring the upper end. In our experience, we haven't really seen anything that demonstrates any need to really micromanage it that way. So long as you keep the alkalinity between 100 and 140, your chlorine is going to be incredibly effective, and your pH will not be having those violent mood swings because of the buffering effect. You should know though, while this is the ideal range, you can try to manage within there. If you're at 100, you may want to throw in a little bit of sodium bicarb to bring that up, and if you're about 140, you can put in a little bit of muriatic acid to try and bring it down. But within that range, you're generally going to be okay. The only time where I think it's a DEFCON 1 must adjust situation is when the alkalinity alkalinity readings get anywhere close to 60 parts per million on the low end. If you get anywhere below that, you absolutely must raise your alkalinity, and then anything above 180 parts per million on the high end, you're absolutely going to want to lower that. If you go below 60 or above 180, you can see a whole lot of unforeseen and unexpected issues with all of your other chemical levels. Your chlorine won't be as effective, your pH is going to be bouncing, and it will affect your water clarity and therefore your enjoyment of your pool. So totally make sure that you keep it between 100 and 140 parts per million. And like I say, if you get below 60 or above 180, start adjusting that to the correct ranges. Now, if your pool uses cyanuric acid like most pools do, and you probably should, depending on the type of pool you have, you should know that cyanuric acid can affect the reading you get on your total alkalinity tests. Now, there are two different ways to figure out how your cyanuric acid is affecting your alkalinity. There's one really quick and simple way, and then there's one way that requires a little bit of mathematics and minor algebra. The first way is according to, I believe it's the IPSA manual. If you take your cyanuric acid reading and you take 1/3 of that, and then you subtract that from your total alkalinity, that will give you about what your true alkalinity reading is. Now, this does assume that your pH level is between 7.2 and 7.8. Now, 7.8 is slightly higher than we like to go, but 7.2 to 7.8, you can totally work it out with that 1/3 method. Now, once you figure out what that is, you will get your carbonate alkalinity reading, and we use this in the LSI scale. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into the LSI scale, but all it really measures is whether or not your water is corrosive or scale forming. So knowing this carbonate alkalinity reading is going to help protect your pool and equipment, much like knowing your pH will protect your pool and your equipment. So to adjust your pool's alkalinity reading, taking it up is really simple. All you're gonna need is sodium bicarbonate. Yes, the same thing that I mentioned before in the pH video. Now, sodium bicarbonate will have a minor effect on your pool's pH, but the main effect of sodium bicarb is going to be on your pool's alkalinity. I'm going to throw up the dosing guide right here, and this is exactly how you're going to adjust your pool's alkalinity using sodium bicarbonate. Sodium bicarb is really easy to use, it's safe to handle with bare hands, although definitely wash them after a while because there is salt. To administer this stuff into the pool, all you're going to do is measure out the weight that you need, and then you'll just broadcast it over the pool surface. If you get any chunks fall to the bottom, it's going to be completely fine. You can brush those out if you would like. I do recommend it for a little bit better and quicker absorption, but some chunks at the bottom aren't going to harm your pool in any way. Taking down your pool's alkalinity though is a little bit more difficult. Trying to adjust your pool's alkalinity down, you're going to have to use muriatic acid. But James, you said we have to use muriatic acid to adjust our pH. Why are we using it for alkalinity? Because alkalinity is a measure of a solution's resistance to acid. In order to lower that, we have to use a lot of really strong acid. Now I'm going to throw up the chart for adjusting your alkalinity with muriatic acid here. Now here is actually where people have gotten this idea of overdosing with their muriatic acid. I mentioned this a little bit in our pH video. People tend to overuse muriatic acid, and then they start running into the cycle of having to use muriatic acid one week and then soda acid next week and then muriatic acid. It's because they're using so much muriatic acid that they're plummeting their alkalinity levels, which in the case of trying to adjust your pH, you aren't trying to do, but here we're definitely trying to bring that alkalinity down, so we are going to use a significantly greater volume of the muriatic acid than we did when adjusting for pH. Now, if you look up how to adjust your alkalinity online, there will be some outlets that will tell you to column your muriatic acid that will affect the alkalinity levels. And in fact, I used to be a huge proponent of this idea. However, in the past few years, there's been a whole lot of research done kind of dispelling this. Columning, it can potentially have an effect where it does lower the alkalinity slightly more effectively, but the risk associated with columning your acid, especially if you do it around any kind of light fixture or close to a step, or on a colored finish, or on a new finish, or on a finish that's even been acid washed before. You can cause all kinds of problems like pulling the color, pitting the surface. In the case of lighting fixtures, you can affect the gaskets that protect the light inside the light unit. You can affect the metal casing all around it. So generally nowadays, I do not recommend the columning of acid to anybody. I recommend simply taking the muriatic acid and walking around the perimeter of the pool, ensuring an even dispersion, and allow the filter to run and the water to circulate, diluting the acid. While I'm talking about acid administration, there are some people that do like to put in the acid to their pool diluted. It has no effect on the acid itself. It's just simply diluted and slightly safer for you to handle. But I have to tell you, the #1 chemistry lab tip that I was given whenever we were working with acids, and that is that you never pour water into an acid, you always pour the acid into water. So if you are going to dilute the acid in a bucket, please don't put the acid in first. You must put the water in the bucket. If you've got a 5-gallon bucket, put 4 gallons of water in, and if you need a gallon of acid, then pour the acid in. Reason being, if you do that, it's going to mitigate any kind of splashes of acid coming out of that bucket. If you start putting water into the bucket and the acid is already there, what splashes out is going to be neat muriatic acid towards you, which, trust me, if it gets on your skin, it's a bad time. Whereas if you put the acid into the water, whatever splashes on you would be water, or at the very least it would be diluted muriatic acid, and it would prevent any kind of catastrophic spills should that bucket go over while you are trying to dilute it. If you are lowering your pool's alkalinity, with the amount of acid that you've had to use, it will also have plummeted your pool's pH. Now, after adjusting your alkalinity down, give it a day or two before you retest for your pH, because your pH is going to be incredibly low. You need to try and give it a second to try and normalize, make sure everything is diluted properly. All right, and then you can go back and adjust your pH with soda ash again. So this has been alkalinity, a little bit easier to understand than pH or chlorine was. Chlorine, you got so many different types of chlorine to do so many things, and with pH, it's all about kind of knowing what things are on the scale and why we want to keep things where it is. But with alkalinity, it's really quite simple. You want to keep between 100 and 140 parts per million is going to make sure that you get the perfect buffering effect. If you go near 180, bring it down. If you go near 60, bring it up. And then you also know how to compensate for your cyanuric acid readings in your pool. Remember, you just got to take 1/3 of that and subtract it from your total alkalinity, and then you'll be able to know what your LSI ratings are real quick and real easy. Okay guys, here comes my sales pitch. If you enjoyed this video, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. We're coming at you every single week with more stuff on this Chemistry Basics series. We've also got some really cool things planned for some heater work. So if you want to be here for all of that kind of stuff, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel. I don't know if I have bell notifications. If we can do that, just, you know, hit that too. I'm pretty sure that'd be kind of neat. I upload a video and it's like, bing, Doc Dean's Pools, new video. This has been James with Doc Dean's Pools, and I'll catch you in the next one.